The new comic book Run tells the story of what happened after the signing of the Voting Rights Act and how John Lewis spent a lifetime fighting for those rights. Ellen recently caught up with Lewis's co-author Andrew Aydin about Run, the second comic book he and the congressman wrote together.
Andrew, thank you for taking some time to join us and tell us all about Run. This comic book, what, first of all, is the message that you want our viewers to know is in there?
First you march, then you run. This is the sequel to March. And to John Lewis, the Voting Rights Act, the signing of it in August 6, 1965, marked the end of the civil rights movement as he knew it. But so much happened afterwards, so much that we're still confronting today. And the message of Run is that you have to be persistent and consistent. You have to keep pushing and keep fighting, because if John Lewis had stepped away after the signing of the Voting Rights Act, we would have been lost. And we have to realize that the pushback, the attempts to undermine that legislation, happened almost immediately. Run picks up 2 days after the signing of the Voting Rights Act in Americus, Georgia, where John Lewis has gone to protest a still segregated church. And he gets arrested and he goes to jail. And that night, the Klan leads their largest hooded march in decades. And we have to understand that the forces that we're fighting today are those same forces that were pushing back against the Voting Rights Act immediately after its passage.
Wow. Hearing the story of how you got this comic book to come together, too, because it was in the congressman's last few days of his life. You were dropping off pages on his front porch because we were also in the pandemic and had to do that social distancing?
Yeah, I live just down the street from him on Capitol Hill. And, you know, we always had sort of our own special bubble. You know, there was staff and there was family, and I kind of crossed in between the two. And, you know, we had to be very careful. We were very optimistic. We were hoping the treatment would work. And so we didn't want to jeopardize anything. And I think sneaking these pages, I'd put them into his mail slot, and then he'd sneak his notes and he'd hide them behind a planter on his front porch. We had our own little system. And I think it gave him a sense of joy, something to look forward to, you know, bringing him new pages, showing him these memories that he'd been reliving, bringing them to life for him.
Absolutely. And looking at your social media, I mean, you posted a lot about him. You shared a lot of times with him. Was he kind of a superhero for you?
He was like a father to me. Congressman would say I'd become like a son to him, and I never had a father. My father left when I was very young, and he really took on that role. And people think of that sort of as a mentorship, like professionally, but you know, what John Lewis taught me was about how to buy a suit and how to be a good man. And, you know, working with him, you know, it's like when he crowd surfed on Colbert, I was the one who caught him. And I think that was sort of a metaphor for our relationship, where he would take these risks and he knew I would be there at the end to catch him and help him through it.
Yeah. Now, doing this media tour without him, I mean, what do you think he would say? I imagine it's hard to do this alone.
You know, I think Run and the story of Run is so important to him that he would be pushing as much as he possibly could for me to get out there and to spread the message. As he would say, you got to spread the gospel, you got to spread the good word. And that's the best I can do for him, because his story is such a hallmark of American history. And we remember Selma, we remember the March on Washington, but we forget those moments where he struggled, where he got defeated, and how he picked himself up and he got back on the horse and he kept riding, he kept pushing, he kept pulling. And I think we all need a little bit of that right now, because, you know, I think as a nation, as a people, we've suffered in the last few years. And finding a way to pick ourselves back up and keep going, that's the most important thing we can do.
Wow, what an incredible relationship there, and the story. You can find Run wherever books are sold.